All right, welcome back, folks, to the WP-Tonic podcast. This week in WordPress and SaaS, we're going to learn a little bit more about WP-Tonic by talking with Jonathan Denwood, the founder of WP-Tonic, this podcast. Then we're also going to talk about some of our favorite interviews in 2021. It's crazy that a new year is already started. 2022 is here. We'll go for a quick break from our sponsor, and then we'll be jumping right back in it to hear from Jonathan Denwood. Sorry, I need to pull up my notes again. Hang on one second here. Welcome back, folks. Our major sponsor, as you heard, is Castos. You can find some great and amazing deals from Castos by going to wptonic.com/recommendations. You can also learn more about all the different services and offerings that WP-Tonic has. So, Jonathan, diving into it here, it's a new year. We're starting off again. But before we dive into kind of the new year and new plans for WP-Tonic and podcasting and where things are going, I think it might be good for our listeners to kind of hear a little bit more about how you started WP-Tonic, how you founded it, kind of the origin story.
Yeah, because I thought we'd just take the opportunity, because I don't really like discussing myself, really. I know it's a bit of that's surprising, isn't it, Stephen? But I don't actually. I'm rather introverted, really. So I really don't. But I thought I've been doing the podcast now. I think it might be 6 to 7 years now.
Wow.
And I've never been really interviewed about how it started and how I got into the world of WordPress in general. So I thought we'll take this opportunity. I sprung this on Stephen, actually, but he's been very gracious. So basically, I started WP-Tonic around 2014, 2015. And it was a friend of mine, Bill Conrad, who was my original co-host on the show. And I met Bill I live in northern Nevada, near Reno, folks. I live in a small town called Carson City. And I was at a local business meeting. I think it was a WordPress meetup group in Reno. And Bill had just moved from California to Reno, and he was ex-special services, ex-army, done a few tours of Afghanistan. I think he was a lieutenant colonel in the special forces, and he was retired, and he got into podcasting as a hobby and WordPress, and we met up, and he suggested, why didn't I do a podcast with him about WordPress? And that's how it started, Stephen. I'd been thinking about it, but I hadn't done much about it. And then Bill said he would edit the show and do the kind of post-production. And I thought, why not?
What was the reason for starting the podcast? So you had the idea to start the podcast, but was there like a goal or objective to start talking together on a podcast about WordPress?
No, there really wasn't. And on reflection, that was a big mistake in some ways, but in other ways, it's been very beneficial to me. But the purpose of doing it was not that clear. And podcasting had an initial enormous, I'm struggling for the right word, enormous push when it first got started. And a lot of people crowded in, and a lot of them left podcasting because the hype around it was a little bit over-exaggerated. Big surprise, something on the web being over-emphasized. But now it's going back into real popularity again, you know, because I think people can see it's a way of really building a real close relationship with your audience. So it's regaining popularity through Spotify, Apple. But when we started, it was in a little bit of a decline. But I had been brought up on Radio 4. I listened to a lot of radio when I was a child. I kind of believed in podcasting, and I just saw it a way of promoting. And also I wanted to promote myself outside of Northern Nevada to a bigger audience, really.
Was the format of the show similar to what it is now, or did you kind of play around with the format as you started and got years of experience underneath your belt?
It was all over the place. You could say it's a little bit now, but the basic, I think with Stephen's help and with my other show, at the time we were just doing a weekly one show. Now we do 2 shows a week. And Stephen's my co-host for the main interview, which is the show that I started with Bill. It's rather when I initially started with Bill, Stephen, it really was literally all over the place, you know. Obviously, the sound quality. Bill is a bit. I call him the sound Nazi. You know, he used to spend hours on editing to a level which would, in my opinion, was a bit over the top. But he's very focused. But if you listen to some of the early ones, it was a bit of a struggle to keep Bill under control, really. I think he would admit sometimes that he is a little bit hard to control, Stephen.
Did you have guests on the show and interview them, or was it you and Bill kind of going back and forth, just talking about WordPress and what was new and what was going on?
It was a mixture, but we mostly had guests. One of the early ones was Matt Medeiros. He came on the show. Literally, the show was pretty rough. I think all these early shows are still up on the WP-Tonic website and on iTunes. So if you want to embarrass me, listeners and viewers, please go listen and comment. That would cause me maximum embarrassment. So I'm sure you're up for it, tribe. No, Matt Medeiros came on, I think it was the 4th, 5th show, and he was the first person from I'd done some outreach and got a very mixed response. You know, who is this geezer? That was my task in the show, to do all the outreach, get the guests. Bill did the editing. Yeah, he came on the show and he looked rather puzzled about the whole thing, but he was very generous. And I still got a soft spot for Matt because he didn't really have to come on the show.
How did you start reaching out to people? Like, were they people that you know? Like, did you already have a connection with Matt or a relationship? Or did you just start saying, oh, this person would be interesting, I'd like to talk to him?
No, I didn't know anybody. I did some outreach. That was when I decided to do the round table show. But no, when it came to the interview show, I didn't know anybody. So literally, it was just people in the WordPress community that come on my radar. And I keep a list of people and posts, podcasts, videos that they've done and they seem interesting. I think it's a little bit more focused now, but for quite a period of time, Stephen, it was just people that I thought were interesting that I just used to invite them, and they either said yes, no, or maybe, and the maybe is a no, really, isn't it?
That's cool. Was it hard to I don't know if courage is maybe the right word. I don't know. To just start reaching out to people. I think there's probably a lot of people that are like, oh, I would like to start a podcast, or, I want to start interviewing people that I find interesting, but getting started is always a big hurdle. I think one of those big hurdles is just maybe self-doubt or not having enough courage to shoot emails out and just kind of dive in and start doing it, and being willing to do, maybe some shows that aren't so great. Like, the early days are always hard. You're figuring out
that's most of my shows. I'm not including you, though, Stephen.
But was that hard? Was that hard for you to get started, or is that something that you didn't really struggle with at all?
I just got on with it, really. You know, if I think if you approach people in a respectful, you know, don't make your outreach email like War and Peace. But also, if it's somebody that's really busy, you know, putting in a link to a video that they've recently done and making it reasonably clear that you've done, you know, you listen to some of their content. And you know, I think that goes down well, because a lot of these people have a lot of people approach them. There are some people that are very sniffy though. So that's just them. But most people are very responsive if you do the outreach in a respectful and you show that you have listened to some of their content. I would be just the same. I don't really respond to people that just, can we post a blog post on your website to use your SEO? Oh, no, you can't really, because it's taken me years to build up that website. But on the other hand, if they said, well, can we, you know, would you like to come on our podcast and we've listened to you, I probably would respond to that. Does that make any sense, Stephen?
Yeah, for sure. When you first started out, and I guess even now, and you have all these different guests on, right? Like from all different places, from all different perspectives and point of view. Do you feel a need to be like objective about WordPress and just kind of looking at it from a objective utility sort of standpoint? Or do you think it's better to look at WordPress from like an opinionated, like thoughts and feelings kind of angle versus just more, straight educational?
Me? Not opinionated? Never, Stephen.
I guess that's my nice way of asking. Was the show as opinionated as it is now back in the early days?
I don't think it is that opinionated. You know, I don't. To be honest, especially the our show that we do together. I'm not here to make the lives of our interviewees hard. They're our guests, aren't they? Really. The Friday show, yeah, it's opinionated. You know, I don't want it to become a snooze fest. I don't want it, you know, and this the WordPress community has a lot of strengths, but it's based on snooze festing, bum licking, and passive aggressiveness, basically. That is the WordPress community for you. People that will never respond to any outreach you do to them because they basically don't like you. So I don't bother asking them to come on the show because I know they will never come on. But that's WordPress for you, isn't it?
There's that great opinionism that I was looking for.
Well, don't you think it's the truth?
Yeah, I mean, the WordPress world is so large with so many different people that I think it's one of the most diverse crowds out there right now. Just from what people's just worldviews of what, like, I've talked to people that are extraordinarily liberal and that's why they use WordPress, right? Because it's open source stuff. And I've talked to people who are extraordinarily conservative and they use WordPress because it's open source. I think open source that you would
introduce politics, wouldn't you, Stephen? But I think I'm reasonably difficult to pin on what my views are, really, because I see myself as a kind of socialist, libertarian, Christian socialist. And I think they're terms that most Americans really don't really understand. And also there's a little bit of contradiction here, you know, mixing libertarian with socialism together. It makes sense to me because I believe in an equal society with equal opportunities for everybody and equality under the law. But I also believe that, you know, we don't make laws just for the sake of making them. You know, you end up with somewhere like Singapore where you if you drop some chewing gum, you can be arrested and put in a prison in Singapore. So I don't, it's a lovely place, but I wouldn't personally want to live in Singapore. I think we got to the time of our break, Steve.
Yeah,
I
was waiting for you to finish your thought there. So we're going to go on our mid-show break here, and when we come back, we'll try to pin Jonathan down on where he's going to go in this new year and what we can expect from WP-Tonic and the WP-Tonic podcast. All right, coming back. Quick note, please join us on the WP-Tonic Mastermind Facebook group where you can find out what we're all about. And you can also find the link to the show notes there. So, Jonathan, it's a new year. Oftentimes people start, thinking through things that they, new goals, new ideas, kind of where they want to take things in directions and stuff. So how about you? Like, what have you been thinking through this year? And kind of going into 2022, like, do you have any ideas for where you want to take the podcast or your website or services?
Yeah, I think in the podcast, I think we've really found, with your help, Stephen, we've found a more sustainable, and it's very easy to get into I've forgotten the term now, just to get into a rhythm and lose enthusiasm. So I've always been about kind of reinventing the show. I think we it's under the WP-Tonic, but I kind of given both shows a different main title. This is This Week in WordPress and Tech, and the Friday show is This Week in WordPress and SaaS, and the Friday show is This Week in WordPress and Tech. And I think that really sums it up, because I think you agreed when we discussed this, that the interview show, we were still going to have people from the WordPress community, experts that can help with your business agency, a freelancer, a WordPress power user, but also get business owners and from the world of SaaS, because I see the two things, they were seen as very separate, and they are still very two separate communities. And I have I've tried, and I need to increase it, I've tried to get myself involved in the world of micro conference with Rob Rowling and his crowd, which are SaaS but bootstrapped base business owners. So I've tried to get into Rob, and Rob has agreed every quarter to come on the round table show, and him and his wife are just great people, and they've both been on our interview show. So they are two kind of separate tribes, but I increasingly see them. I really see WordPress being more a plugin, but extra services being offered as a SaaS. So I see this diversion, either you're a plugin or you're a SaaS. I see that breaking down to some extent. What do you think about that, Stephen?
Yeah, it's a really interesting world in WordPress right now, especially as it feels like the difference between a plugin and services is oftentimes mixed. There's a lot more plugins that require subscription type based modeling that include like more support. I was just talking to somebody about a real estate plugin. They do like IDX configuration work. So essentially just taking all the properties from...
I only know because I run another business in that area and do a podcast in that area. So it's something I know very little about.
Podcasts all over. Yeah. But what was interesting was once you purchased their plugin, it came with free setup. So like you purchased this $500 plugin, right? And then they set it up for you. It's like this end-to-end sort of system where it's not just here's the code, install it, but they've included the whole service thing. And then you can, re-up every year to get, to keep that service going and stuff. But having a plugin with a service backend. And then now we're also seeing a lot of people, creating services and kind of coming in at it from the opposite direction, where they're more of just a service-oriented company, and they help you figure out what plugins you should need or want or install to get done what you
I
want.
think, and you know, I've got to make clear they are major sponsors of the show, but Craig and Matt Medeiros works for Craig. But Castos to me is a perfect model of what can be achieved, because Craig bought that plugin, Simply Podcast, you know, which was one of the main if you wanted the player, a nice looking player on your WordPress website, that's what he started off with. Plus he offered editing and he had another side of his business which was pure service orientated, if you were looking to have your episodes edited. But now it's become a hybrid. He still offers the plugin. He still offers these high-end editing services and consultation. But now they've got the whole hosting your podcasts on the Castro platform. So to me, Castos itself has a very interesting business model. And I see more WordPress entrepreneurs and business owners looking at that hybrid model, Stephen.
Yeah, it's an interesting way to grow and expand. And as the WordPress ecosystem keeps getting bigger and bigger, I think we'll see that more and more.
I think the other thing you touched on is, I think the other thing I've observed in the past 3 years, and especially since the pandemic, is that you're saying it's such a big community. Well, you've got to understand, when I first entered the WordPress community, it was really fundamentally just dominated when it came to media through a small group of people that had, Chris Lama is the perfect example of this, that had built up a large following based on them going to a lot of WordCamps and speaking at a lot of WordCamps. Brian Clark and the two Brians, when it came to Studio Press, it was a long time ago since I last interviewed Brian Clark of Studio Press, or formerly of Studio Press. But he was a little bit different because he had a very large community outside of WordPress through building up a large community through content copywriting and his advice through that, and Copy Blogger. He had built his own tribe outside. But most of the WordPress media people, there was only about 12, maybe 20 of them in total, that had a lot of influence and domination, and they had built it by going to a lot of WordCamps and utilizing their weekends to do that. Chris Lemmer is a perfect example of that. But now it's become much more internationalized. You know, you got the big coding shops like Astra, Fluent, that are based in the Indian subcontinent and Eastern Europe. It's a much more internationalized, and that, which is good in one way, but also means when I first got it, you actually could meet people that you thought were well above you at a WordCamp and go up to them and have a conversation with them. So, which had its good points and its bad points, because if, you know, there was a lot of passive, and it's still there in this older environment, this feeling. There's a lot, because it was a much smaller community, and it's like a family. There's some family members you can't have a real honest bust up with them because they're stuck with you for life. But on the other hand, you don't particularly like them either.
Yeah, you brought up Chris Lama. I think whether people know Chris Lama's name or not is a good litmus test for how long have they been in the WordPress ecosystem. Because Chris Lama is still, you know, a name that's out there, but it was like I feel like people just knew him or talked about him more, but now that WordPress has gotten international and so much larger, there's all these other people that kind of make the whole news space and area of WordPress a lot more busy and stuff. And so,
well, it's just, it amazes me because there's, I know we're getting close to having to wrap up the podcast part of the show, but I don't know what it amazes you, but it amazes me that there's plugins that come on my radar that got 10, 20, 40, 50, 100,000 active users paying or for their free plugin if they got that model.
Yeah.
And I've never even heard of the plugin. I've never even heard of the coding shop. I've never heard of them.
Yep. Yeah.
And that still regularly happens. Are you the same, Stephen?
Yeah, for sure. I can't remember the name of the plugin. Can't remember it now, but it just happened to me last week where I was looking for a solution to something and came across this plugin. I was like, oh, I've never heard about this. I wonder if there's any reviews. And there's like 100 reviews and, thousands of downloads. And it's like, how didn't I know about this? But it's a world that's growing and getting bigger and faster all the time. I think that's all the time we have for the podcast. So we're going to hop into bonus content here. But before we do that, please consider signing up to the weekly WP-Tonic newsletter, which you can find in the episode show notes. And Jonathan, how can people find out more about you?
Well, just go to the WP-Tonic website or join us on the WP-Tonic Facebook group page. It's the Mastermind WordPress group page. Join us there. I try and post new stuff, and so does Spencer and a couple of the other people from the Roundtable group. It's grown slowly, but we're determined to keep it going. And leave any comments, questions that you want on there. And also join us on the WP-Tonic YouTube channel and subscribe to that. That's got a lot of videos. I produce a lot of new content for the WP-Tonic YouTube channel. You find these interviews on there, but a host of other useful content. Back over to you, Stephen.
Perfect. Thanks for that. If you want to listen to the bonus content, head over to YouTube or the WP-Tonic Mastermind Facebook group. See you guys there. Bye. All right. Bonus content. So something I wanted to make sure we got to is your thoughts on all of the interviews that we've had over 2021. Which ones stuck out to you? What about them stuck out? Maybe we can just talk through that briefly here.
Yeah. Well, I think I made up a short list and I think you got one extra, but I think I kind of bagged the ones that you were looking at. So that's what you said in your email to me.
Yeah.
Which gave me great joy, actually, Stephen. I give Stephen a hard time, but he just laughs it off. He don't care. It's like water on the fish back for Stephen. He's too busy counting his money.
I wish that was true.
Yeah, especially when you've got your new accounts, lady. There we go. I've always enjoyed my conversation. I think it's the third time that I've interviewed, and that's Rand Fishkin. He is the guy, the big daddy, still is. From the old days, he doesn't like me saying you're the grandfather of SEO, Rand, because obviously he's trying to position his new business in a slightly different sector. But I still see him as the grand, and he's just really a very pleasant guy, easy to approach. Him and his Amantha, I think that's his lead. That helps him run his new business. But they're always great conversations, aren't they? And Rand's he's always up to speak his mind, really, isn't he?
Yeah, I think the fascinating thing about that conversation, too, is diving into this idea of how do you know what your tribe or your customer group or target market, whatever you want to call it, is talking about, like on Twitter, and who else is talking about it. And it's kind of elevating that target market conversation one step higher. It's not just trying to define the things they're interested in. It's actually paying attention to that conversation and figuring out ways that you can engage in that conversation, which I think is really, really smart, especially as we move more and more into this digital social kind of world.
Yeah, because his product really, it's if you compare it to hiring people to do real product research, real audience or possible customer research, that is not cheap, because it's you've got to hire people.
Takes so much time.
People know what they're doing, interviewing enough people and having somebody do those interviews that can remove bias and still ask the right and give you a report that gives you. None of that is cheap. So what he's offering, it can't compare to detailed research, but the price point is still considerably lower. And if you're really if it's really important to keep up, or you're looking for new kind of, I call them buckets, and using his tool, it's in my own sector where I've been looking at, who is the audience of Lifter LMS, who's the audience of LearnDash, who is the audience of this or that. It's been quite, by utilizing his tool, it's been quite clear they're very different tribes, very different groups of people that look at LearnDash, which was under Justin's and his wife before they sold it. And what is the tribe that consumes Lifter LMS's content? And Chris and his partner, Chris is a friend of the show and a personal friend of mine. So it's really quite interesting.
Yeah. Any other videos or, I guess, podcast interviews?
Oh, yeah. So we still got some time. We've still got 10 minutes. You can't escape too quick, Stephen.
No, I'm just wondering which one you want to talk about next. I mean, we have Morten Rand Hendrickson.
The Viking.
We have 80.
The Viking. Yeah. What did you think of Morten?
I always find the conversations with Morten to be very fun and engaging, because we never actually stay on the topic that we plan to stay on. It always goes sideways at some point, but in a very interesting and intellectually intriguing way. I think Morten likes to spend a lot of time thinking about I don't know, the world in a little bit larger scale, a larger view, and oftentimes. When we start going down a specific route, right, he'll zoom it out and we'll start looking at it from 1,000-foot view and start thinking about the world and how all the puzzle pieces work together. That's probably what I enjoyed the most about talking to Morten.
Yeah, he's one of the most interesting people in the digital space to some extent. He had, like what we were saying about Brian Clark. I actually have to try and get Brian back on the show, because both Brian Clark and Brian Gardner. Brian Gardner regularly has come on the show. I think he's coming back on the Friday show the next few weeks. They're both really interesting individuals. But Morten, I do find Morten really, really, really interesting. He's a personal friend. But also it's just his breadth of knowledge. And like you say, he's one of these individuals that can do the real nitty-gritty work, but also have a 10,000 feet view of where things are going. I don't agree with everything he says, and he gets rather upset when I do disagree. But I'm English from background. I'm used to like getting down the pub and at your best friends, having a real argument with your friends and then meeting them next week. Americans, they seem to struggle with dealing with people that have very different views and still keeping it polite, and even though you can have a passionate disagreement.
Yeah, that's a really good point. What about the interview with Ben Rittner, the founder of Cadence? I did not make that interview.
You didn't. You missed that.
That was disappointing. What did I miss?
Ben's just a force of nature. Him and his wife, before they sold their business to Chris Lama and Liquid Web, which is what But Ben, I felt really great for Ben because being a really great developer plus doing all the business side, and I think Cadence had just blown up into something really big and I think Ben just really does like being a coder and doing all the business side. He had help, yeah. I think he had a part. But it was just growing, and it was. But they were, and they still are. They're based in Montana, and they just came on the scene, and just the plugins and themes just really just grew at such a rate and such quality of coding and design. It really just showed you that a small but totally focused and dedicated code shop still can really make a big impact in the WordPress space, where you're dealing with millions and millions of people utilizing your products.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because it's really easy to kind of get scared away by some of the huge dev shops out there in the WordPress ecosystem these days. But as long as you niche down and just really focus, I think there's still room to build some amazing products and some amazing things in there.
Well, he proved it, didn't it? And the quality of coding, and he maintained. Others are just kind of imploded because the volume he emitted himself, the level of support tickets, just in general inquiries. Just when you get to that kind of level, that's probably one of them. When we interviewed him, that was one of them. You know, the money was great, the buyout was great, but he was also, I think he just wanted the time to refocus on the part of the business that he really liked.
Yeah. And then how about we had, talking about things blowing up, becoming big and getting sold, 80, one of the founders of WooCommerce. That's probably, one of the largest plugins that's used across, I don't know how many millions of sites, that's, powering billions of dollars of sales. That was a really interesting conversation, kind of hearing about the early days of WooCommerce. He's
an interesting dude in general, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's very charming, but I understand he's, but he can be ruthless at the same time. But he's not, but he's he loves his poetry. Him and his team, I think he said he still lives in South Africa. They were in the early days, and which was unusual. They were based outside of North America, and they managed to build a business, a substantial business that got bought out by Automatic outside of North America in South Africa, which was unusual when they did it. They also really, some of the things that are considered just general mill, how you run a business in the WordPress ecosystem, they were some of the first people that worked out the nitty-gritty, which is similar to the two Brians when it comes to Studio Press, about how you sell themes, how you sell commercial plugins. And also they made mistakes, and I think some of the criticism that WooCommerce received about how it was initially thought is totally unfair and total nonsense. Some of the other criticism of how they had to change their position on lifetime deals, I feel is more justifiable. But on the other hand, it was still very early days. And I think they had to change their position. And also, it was a very large plugin with a lot of support tickets. So offering lifetime deals with no limit to the amount of people they did, which included not only their themes, but the core plugin, I think they were forced to have to retract their lifetime deal, because I think they would have gone bust.
Yeah. And I mean, I think if you asked anybody, like, would you rather have your lifetime deal revoked, or would you rather have the company go out of business and have a non-supported plugin that's about ready to die on your site? Like, everybody would rather, or most people would rather say that, you know, fine, like I'll pony up some more money or whatever,
Well, it
than
just
having a dead
depends.
plugin.
It's
But
been on, because we've recently had this with another coding shop that bought a very popular plugin. Um, you know, active, and they haven't handled things very well. I certainly wouldn't be very, some people,
no.
some people say it was all planned and they were just trying out. Who knows? It's all very in the shadows, as far as I'm concerned. But I think you just, I think a better way of handling it, and Spencer pointed out, they could have just said, they could have built a version 2.0 and say, we're going to continue supporting the classic. But if you want all these new functionalities, you're going to have to cough up some more money version 2 and then on that. But I think it's really, when you're offering, I think lifetime deals, when you start in a plugin, if you're looking to get some capital to help you develop the plugin, I think it's totally fine. Or offering it at crucial, when you're increasing the functionality and you want to get some further money in, maybe like on Cyber Monday, having a limited, but only having so many licenses on offer. I think when you get into problems is if you consistently are selling lifetime deals and it's a complicated plugin. How on earth is that sustainable? It isn't, is it?
It's really not. We're almost out of time here, but I just wanted to get to Paul Charlton, WP-Tut's interview that we did. The one thing that I loved about that interview was just his unique approach to carving out a space inside of WordPress and building up a following. He does a lot of tutorials, and it's kind of where he kind of started. I keep running across his tutorials being posted by plugin authors. Like, he'll make a tutorial, they'll grab that, they'll post it. And honestly, that's where I first came across him. And he's one of the few people that I know that will take a plugin that it seems like is probably rising in the ranks, and he makes one of the first tutorials for that plugin, post it online. And I think that's kind of his unique bent that's got him a lot of traction in the WordPress space. And now he's built such a following that he can pretty much do whatever he wants. And he gets
I know. I think
views.
he's done a fantastic job, and he came on the Friday Roundtable show just before Christmas. And, I also know Adam Pazier from WP Crafter. Adam used to come on the show. He's come off the radar. I'm going to have to email Adam and see if he's okay, that he hasn't gone down with the virus. I've been planning, but I'll do that this week. Adam's a character. So is Paul. But Paul, people don't realise he's a machine. The amount of content, and I think he's doing the editing mostly himself. And the quality of the reviews, and he's just a really straight shooter, isn't he? And because of the reality of the market, and we've had discussions about this, Stephen, around podcasting, and he gets most of his income from affiliate marketing. And affiliate it's really quite easy to lose your credibility when you go down hard into the world of affiliate marketing. What I really admire about Paul is that he's managed to keep his credibility, even though, and he's done it in a very straightforward way, where other people I know in the WordPress community, and I know it's difficult, don't get me wrong here, I think there's a line, and they've crossed that line, and it started to affect their credibility when it comes to affiliate marketing.
Yeah, I think he's able to thread that needle because a lot of his videos are so factual based. It's like, if you want to do this, here's a plugin that will do it. Here's how you do it at the end. He's not saying this is the best plugin in the world to do whatever. He's just saying, like, hey, if you're trying to do something, here you go.
I'm a bit sensitive about it because I know what Kajabi, and don't get me wrong, I admire the founders of Kajabi. They're
Yeah.
really great marketing people. But I do also know that they went to literally every influencer on YouTube in the kind of membership, and they offered them some, fantastic affiliate deals. That's
Yep.
how business is done. Real sweetheart deals. I think people would be aghast how much some of these influencers have earned by promoting Kajabi. But also, I think people just don't realize how much. And when we're talking six-figure sums, I think it really, unless you make it very, very public, it must influence your balance, mustn't it?
For sure. All right. Well, I think that's all the time we have for today. It's been a lot of fun learning about WP Tonic podcast, where it's going to go, and then also just kind of thinking back through the last year of interviews, things we learned, people we talked to. So everyone have a great start to your 2022, a great January. We'll catch you all next week.
Yeah, we'll see you soon, and thanks for being my co-host in 2021, Stephen. You're being a blast, putting up with my madness, putting up with my craziness. We'll see you next week, folks. Bye.
Bye.